My name is Allison Pham, and I'll be presenting on SQ3R for my final presentation. Now, what is SQ3R? It focuses on surveying, questioning, reading, reciting, and reviewing through previewing content of an article beforehand, creating questions based on the headers provided for an article or reading passage, reading strategically throughout in order to, one, retain information, and also be generally careful when reading through the contents. And lastly, retrieving to strengthen learning based on a specific passage that is provided to a student. Now, it is an active reading system, meaning that it is able to provide students with the opportunity to further retain information, and also generally it is geared towards comprehension, engagement, and memory, meaning that students are able to learn further, and also it is better for long-term usage. Now, SQ3R improves learning through its effectiveness, especially through different research articles, which I'll be heading to shortly. However, my first article focuses on how learning strategies require students to be reorganizing the information inside of their own brain and resetting it, meaning that they're able to have a deeper processing and understanding of the article and what content they are consuming. Now, this is able to help them, one, improve their memory and recalling, but then also ensure they are able to understand what the article is saying through their own words by putting it directly for them. Moving on to my next article that I'm citing, it focuses on how basically strategies involve active engagement, meaning that it will lead to long-term retention. This means that it is able to space things a little bit more out rather than crunching things together, such as, for example, rereading content, which isn't necessarily as effective. Covered in research article number 3, focuses on how basically, even though rereading is very popular, it may not necessarily always be super helpful, especially because it's more of a passive type of strategy rather than active. Now, I use SQ3R to study specific is through first rereading over different headings, provided summaries in the case of where they are given, and also to get a general sense of articles necessarily, which is also why I typically one, ask questions in my head. I'm like, oh, what is this specific thing perhaps pertaining? What is this word in the case of where I'm unfamiliar with it, or if it's like a concept that I'm not entirely sure about yet. Now, reading over each section carefully allows for me to, one, be able to look for the answers to the questions, but then also providing me the opportunity to further actually understand what the article is saying. My method is after each major section, for example, each major heading, I take a pause and I try to, or attempt to explain the general main focus. In the case of where I do miss any points, I will go back a little bit afterwards just to see which points I might have missed. Especially since if for longer passages or longer paragraphs, it might be difficult to retain all the main key points. And lastly, to wrap up, in terms of reviewing, I focus on, one, looking over the questions again, the provided summaries if they were provided in the beginning, and also looking back on the portions that I did focus on summarizing. This is in the general outcome is comprehension, specifically increase of it in terms of helping me understand the articles that I was reading better, allowing for me to generally understand rather than specifically just reading it directly through. Allows for me to reassess previous material, and I was able to recall details more easily, meaning that it was more straightforward. And next up, for engagement, through asking different questions, I was able to be more engaged with the content, meaning that I was able to retain my focus more strongly. Now, in terms of adapting this for future use, this can include for long reading passages, especially because breaking SQ3R into different small chunks is super helpful, especially because it can help reduce one, how overwhelming it might be, and also remains generally active in the learning portion. Next up is STEM courses, especially because there are a lot of different formulas, theories, diagrams, etc. Actually works well in terms of practice problems that are typically provided. Case of where students do struggle with focusing, I also apply / relate to this a little bit. It helps take things a step further, especially because in terms of, one, it makes it more efficient, but also more engaging. And this can also be achieved through different digital tools. There's apps as well as just also regular voice memos that are provided on like phone and also like laptops. And lastly, my target in the future is to combine SQ3R with other methods that I use, such as time blocking and the Pomodoro technique. For time blocking, I typically like to not allocate too much like in terms of every single hour of the day, but having key sections off. And as well as for the Pomodoro technique, I usually like to include somewhat medium-sized ish study sessions, and then also with small breaks in between through this method. And because since I do use these methods frequently and also enjoy using them, it helps me more engage as well, especially if I combine it with SQ3R, meaning that I'm able to use it more in the long term. And thank you so much for listening. Here are my citations that I used for research.